Hi everyone, my name is Asia McIntyre, and before I get started, I just wanted to say I hope everyone is doing well, and I hope everyone and their families are safe, and I just hope that everyone is surviving this pandemic and whatnot. Again, my name is Asia McIntyre, and I did my capstone on mathematical psychology. So first, just a little bit about mathematical psychology. Mathematical psychology is the study of behavior through a mathematical scope. This science attempts to predict behavior by applying mathematical formulas and statistics to analyze data. Scientists attempt to build a foundation of formulas and laws that they can use as the basis for their studies. Mathematical psychology is a subfield of psychology that started in the 1950s. Then in 1979, the Society for Mathematical Psychology was founded. The Society for Mathematical Psychology attempts to uphold the continuous progression and communication of research in mathematical psychology and related disciplines. A little history. Before mathematical psychology, psychological research was typically produced by psychologists, and the work often had a strong experimental component. Over the last couple of decades, other researchers and programs became interested in the field, especially in economics and applied mathematics. Mathematical psychology refers to statistics and mathematics used to quantify qualitative data to predict future behavior. This is important because a lot of people do not believe this field. What I mean by this field is like the psychology field is a credible science. Psychology often does not meet the 5 basic requirements for a field to be considered scientifically rigorous. And the 5 requirements are clearly defined terminology, quantifiability, highly controlled experiment conditions, reproducibility, and finally predictability and testability. Mathematical psychology attempts to break these barriers and transform psychology and psychological research into a credible science. Data is essential in research. It is your proof. Without it, you have nothing. It's what you are collecting. Why should someone believe you yet when you have no proof or hard facts to back up your words? Data is a collection of facts, numbers, words, measurements, and observations. Data can be categorized as either qualitative and or quantitative. Both qualitative and quantitative methods are essential in research and both play important roles. Qualitative data and research is a perspective-based method of research or data. The responses given are not measured, they are categorized. Qualitative data is important, however, it comes with its limitations. You cannot verify the research results of qualitative data. Qualitative research requires thorough and thoughtful planning to ensure the obtained results are accurate. Qualitative data is descriptive and regards phenomenon which can be observed but not measured. Then we have quantitative data. Quantitative data in research collects data in a numerical form which can be put into rank order or into categories or even measured in units of measurements. It is information about quantities and therefore numbers. Strong experiments typically yield quantitative data. Psychologists in general typically study people. The traditional approach to science is not seen as an appropriate way of carrying out research. When psychologists do a majority of their experiments, most of them try to find possible significant relations between 2 or more psychological objects. The disadvantage of this approach is that they do not look at the findings as a system, therefore psychologists cannot describe why some of the coefficients in their study are significant. By adding a mathematical aspect, you can describe and analyze systems in psychology in depth. Psychology is important. It deals with the study of the mental process as well as behavior at the same time. Psychological research explores how the mind works. It takes a look at how people learn and how it facilitates peak human performance. Psychology is also used to better understand and help those with inevitable developmental disorders. Mathematical psychology is essential because it enlightens us about the processes that lie beneath psychological functioning, which includes decision-making, problem-solving, attention, memory, and other important cognitive processes. Mathematical psychology is an approach to psychology or psychological research that is based on mathematical modeling of perception, cognitive, and motor processes, and on the establishment of law-like rules. So it kind of gives psychology that validity and that extra, like the proof, like behind the research to make it more just valid. The theory of measurement is a vital topic in mathematical psychology. Measurement theory is the study of how quantities are assigned to a subject and singularities and its concerns. This includes the kinds of data that can be measured, how dissimilar measures relate to each other, and the problem of error in the measurement process. Any theory of measurement must come to grasp with three rudimentary concepts, and that is first error, then representation, which is the justification of numbers assigned, and then lastly the uniqueness. There are a numerous amount of systems of axioms or basic rubrics and assumptions that have been formulated as a foundation of measurement theory. Theorists have created laws established through experimental conclusion to predict repeated behavior. One of these laws is the probability of choice. The total probability rule, which is also called the law of probability or the probability of choice, separates probability calculations into unique and discrete parts. It is typically used to find the probability of an event, which we'll call A, when we don't know enough about A's probability to calculate it directly. You can take a related event B and use that to calculate the probability for A. Choice experiments are frequently performed in marketing and other fields of behavioral research in order to establish individuals' preference between items. So below I listed the probability of choice equation, and this is like up to infinity basically, so it's finding an event given like another event basically. I think it's a bit easier to explain an equation like with an example. So here I have an example for us, and it says if we were to draw two cards from a well-shuffled deck of cards, what's the probability that the second card pulled from this well-shuffled deck of cards is an ace? So I think it's easier to break the equation into its two different scenarios. So we need that second card to be an ace, but the first card we pulled can either be an ace or it can be like a non-ace card, any of those other cards in the deck, basically. So I'm going to break up this equation into parts. So my first scenario, I'm going to say the first card we pull is also an ace. So if the first card we pull is an ace, then there's a 4 out of 52 chance of us doing that. So our first part is going to be 4 out of 52 because that's our probability of pulling an ace as our first card. And then our probability of pulling an ace as that second card leaves us with 3 out of 51 cards because there's only 3 aces left and we took a card out, so there's only 51 cards left. And then the second part of that equation is the probability that the first card we pulled is not an ace. So the probability of that occurring is 48 out of 52 because there's 48 non-ace cards in the deck. And in our first pull, we're going to have 52 cards. And then in the probability that our second card will be an ace now is greater. It's 4 out of 51 because we now have all 4 of the aces in the deck, but there are only 51 cards left because we took one out. So here is just the example worked out. So you can kind of see it a bit clearer here. And then your answer is 4 out of 52. The total probability is 4 out of 52. Statistics help us make sense of and interpret information. In psychology, you are constantly confronted with an enormous amount of data. With statistics, we can organize and make sense of this data. Statistics help answer the questions: how do changes in one variable impact other variables? What is the inclusive strengths of that relationship, and what does that mean? Also, is there a way we can measure that relationship or the relationship? Statistics allow psychologists to organize, describe, and make inferences based upon data. Descriptive statistics help us to summarize our data, whereas inferential statistics are used to identify statistically significant differences between groups of data, such as intervention and control groups in a randomized control study. Statistics is a branch of mathematics. Without statistics, you cannot tell whether the results of an experiment you have just performed are telling you something useful, or if the results are just down to chance. And that's what makes it vital to an experimental science, and that's why it's necessary. Mathematics is important. It is a detailed discipline where formulas typically have only one set of precise answers. Psychology is more subjective. Without math, it is difficult to see how two terms integrate with and work with one another. Statistics, when used to evaluate psychological experiments, tell the researcher if the data collected is helpful and valuable, or if the data is the product of chance. The formulas are developed through experimentation and can help society change its approach to solving problems like infectious disease, disability issues, school dropouts, and school control by predicting behaviors, as well as suggesting program adaptations to address the behaviors. This is the value of mathematical psychology. Mathematical psychologists are active in many fields of psychology, especially in the psychophysics, sensational and perception, problem solving and decision making, learning, memory, and language department. And they're also in clinical psychology, social psychology, and the psychology of music. Thank you.